I'm Carole Bremson. I'm an actor and director, and I'm delighted that Waterloo Press is publishing my first novel, The Lie Direct. What's it about? Well, someone once said to me, what do actors do all day when they're sitting in their dressing room for long periods of time? Don't they get bored? Well, no, they don't. Because all those compelling backstage dramas that go on from day to day are so fascinating. And they have inspired me to write this novel. The Lie Direct opens in the swinging 60s in London and spans the decades through to the 90s and goes back in time to a 1950s production which touches the lives of its four main characters. As we know, the heightened world of theatre has always been a bubble. And as we know, what goes on tour stays on tour. Well, what if it doesn't? In this extract, matinee idol Ronald Tavender and rising star Tom Herman are both at the Old Vic in 1969 for a matinee performance of As You Like It, one in the audience, the other on stage. Here, the older actor reflects on his experience. Ronnie Tavender left Fraser and Barney at the stage door and went off in search of his car. Said I'd get in early for a new costume fitting before the show. Tell Tom I loved it and I'll be in touch later, he said apologetically. It wasn't until he was safely back behind his own dressing room door that Ronnie felt a twinge of conscience. He'd had every intention of going backstage to congratulate Tom, but somehow he just couldn't do it. Should have done, he told himself. Silly to feel jealous. What am I jealous about? I'm starring in a major West End hit, probably being paid twice as much, and what do? Skulk off without a word. But Ronnie knew exactly why his courage had failed him. He'd been at the Vic years before, knew every inch of that raked stage, but he'd never been involved in anything as daring or exciting as he'd seen that afternoon. He'd done a lot of Shakespeare in his day and remembered the sound of classical acting, great booming voices reverberating around the auditorium like roars of thunder. No evidence of that this afternoon, just actors engrossed in genuine conversation. He was astonished how ordinary it was. He thought he knew how to act, but those actors out there were altogether a different breed, mesmerising, dangerous, and young. They took risks with the verse, made even the dullest sections come alive with effortless clarity, and the smaller roles were so well defined that Ronnie asked himself one simple question: why haven't I seen them portrayed with such insight before? He'd heard much older actors mention another all-male production of As You Like It back in the 1920s, but wasn't that simply a gimmick? He knew that generation couldn't allude to the love that dare not speak its name. But even now, after 40 years, eyebrows would still be raised and accusations of pretty boys with ladylike manners parading across the stage were bound to be made, even in the swinging 60s. He hoped this director's attempt would suffer no such attacks. In an age of enlightened promiscuity and free love, audiences had to be more tolerant and liberal, surely. Nevertheless, Ronnie was uncomfortable with what he'd seen, disturbed by his reactions to it. The experience had shaken him profoundly, leaving behind an inescapable realization that many feelings had been awoken in him today, which he'd been trying to suppress for most of his life.